Innocent civilians suffering as Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine enters a new phase. After failing to quickly capture key cities like Kyiv, Putin appears to be shifting his focus to inflict as much damage to the country as possible. The city of Mariupol refusing Russia's demand to surrender, even after enduring weeks of devastating airstrikes. Ukrainian President Zelensky continues his call for peace, but says his country won't give any land to Russia.
I think that we have to use any format, any chance in order to have a possibility of negotiating, the possibility of talking to Putin. But if these attempts fail, that would mean that this is a third world war.
This comes as President Biden prepares to head to Europe, where he'll attend a major NATO summit in Brussels, as well as a meeting with the Polish president in Warsaw. Jeff Paul is in Lviv, Ukraine, with the latest. Jeff?
Yeah, air raid sirens continue to go off here in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv. And despite those warnings, people here in the city are very much trying to get on with their daily lives as much as possible. But they do realize that at any moment things could change, and they are watching very closely what's happening just outside of this city center, especially to the east and to the south in coastal towns like Mariupol, where hundreds of thousands of people right now are trapped and trying to get out of harm's way after Russia issued that ultimatum for the city to lay down its arms. The mayor didn't even wait for the deadline and rejected that offer to surrender without hesitation. Officials say after weeks of heavy shelling and constant bombardments, they estimate upwards of 2,300 people have died in the city. Residents of this area who've survived the constant attacks say battles are taking place on nearly every street.
There is no Mariupol anymore. They bombed everything. It's all this drama theater and maternity hospital and art school. It's all of this is very catchy for the news, for the media. But in reality, they bombed everything. We don't have Mariupol anymore. We have to build this city from scratch.
In Kyiv, crews are sifting through what's left of a shopping center after it was blown up last night. Ukraine estimates as many as 8 were killed after a Russian-fired rocket blasted through the mall in that city. The explosion charred cars and sent shrapnel into nearby homes and businesses. Now, Russia claims that they only targeted the shopping center because it was housing Ukrainian missiles and rockets, but that claim has not been independently confirmed by anyone. In fact, one mother who spoke just today about that incident said her daughter was working in that very shopping center. And you can just imagine some of those thoughts just thinking if that attack had happened just the day before. Judge Janine.
All right, Jeff, thanks so much. Stay safe. Dana, I'm going to start with you. We're in the 4th week of this. And every day we hear about more and more attacks on civilians, civilian protesters being shot and killed. And we hear more and more about literally war crimes happening. When Zelensky talks about the beginning of the Third World War, is he really talking about where we are possibly?
Well, actually, that phrase has been used since the first day of this invasion by some, because one of the things that President Biden is trying to do, and the other NATO countries, is to figure out how do you provide the Ukrainians enough so that they can defend themselves without, again, I disagree with how we are describing how Putin is provoked, because he's apparently provoked by everything, but that to provoke him into a nuclear war. Nobody wants that. I don't think Putin wants that. I don't really know what Putin wants, but I imagine that he doesn't want that. So I think that this trip that Biden is going to take this week is important. I think it's good that he's going. I think that it's time for some more front seat diplomacy. He sent Kamala Harris. That did not necessarily move the needle. So now he has to go. And I think it's better to be sitting in a room face to face with the other NATO leaders rather than on Zoom, because that's not going to cut it. They have so many important decisions to make, and they have a terrible dilemma in this situation. And Joey could answer this question I have that it's been going through my mind, which is, we're giving the Ukrainians enough to keep, they are doing pretty well defending themselves. And it could be that Zelensky thinks that he can keep the capital city of Kyiv. But outside of Kyiv, if you don't give them enough to win quickly or to beat them back quickly, then you're just going to lose slowly. And if that happens, then you're going to see the death toll of civilians increase much more.
You know, Joey, I'll go to you on that. You know, it appears that we're at a stalemate right now, that there was a deadline that was given to Zelensky at 10 p.m. our time last night to surrender. And he hasn't gotten Mariupol, Putin. He hasn't gotten Kyiv. And he's trying to destroy and crush the spirits of the Ukrainians. But when you're at a stalemate, it's a very dangerous time, is it not? And what does Putin do now?
Well, and I think when Zelensky says, then it'll be World War III, I think what Zelensky's saying, in my opinion, I can't translate word for word, is if we continue to hold him off, he's going to eventually, he being Putin, is going to eventually use chemical weapons, use nuclear weapons, and then the West has already said, essentially, when that happens, they're involved. Right. And so I think what Zelensky's saying is, hey, what he's saying is, you all underestimated us. We're able to stay in this fight because of your help, actually, because of the weapons you are giving us. If we stay in this fight and don't win decisively, that's what's next. And he may be true. That might be true. I think we try to report on this every single day, and you can't report on this one day to the other. We say they still haven't gotten Mariupol. Well, they haven't gotten Mariupol, but Mariupol is a wasteland of war. Right. So does it matter if they're sitting in the city center or not? And that's part of the problem here. Just like what Dana was saying, just to kind of wrap this up, if the end result is we're 3 months of war and 30,000 people dead and Russia standing in the center of Kyiv, when you look back, what do you say? Well, you know, what was the purpose of this war? What was gained from it? What was gained from those 30,000 deaths? It may be the next 30 years of insurgency, but that's just more innocent people dying. Any insurgency turns into IEDs in Moscow before it turns into Ukraine being independent again.
And, you know, Greg, with respect to that, I mean, let's assume that he just, you know, it's scorched earth from this point on. He will never defeat the Ukrainian spirit. And the Russians, they don't appear to have the ability to actually occupy. What do the Russians do at that point?
You know, in your fantasy is that they take care of the problem themselves, but I don't know if that's going to happen because Putin is so far removed. It's weird. He's essentially destroying the very thing that he claims that he cherishes. Yeah. Which is Ukraine. I mean, it's like a really bitter, acrimonious breakup where the creep goes, well, if I can't have you, no one will.
And then it gets real bad.
And then it gets real bad. And
Yeah.
it really is the opposite of damage control, what he's doing. And I'm very pessimistic about Biden just because he doesn't seem like he's in any particular rush to fix this. And we know that, I mean, like Joey we were talking about how many examples there are of places where we've helped. And it didn't help. And I'm beginning to feel that, like, the longer we do this, the longer it goes on, and the longer that it goes on, the more people die. It's really weird. This is the longest fog of war I've seen. And the only thing that's really clear is the brutality. I mean, both sides say they're winning. You know, how can that be? Both sides are calling each other Nazis, and Russia was first when they did that. I don't know how to break that stalemate, but we need some kind of creative thinking. And you know, I go back to the only example that I can think of is that, like, you know, when Trump went to North Korea, it was like, let's just see what happens. Let's shake the box, see what happens. You know, we can promise something. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. At least it was innovative, and it introduced another variable into a situation where we already knew the variables there were not working. And so now we're like 4 weeks in, and we're kind of in the same place we were before. Well,
we're 4 weeks in on this, but we're since 2014 on this war, and that's the part we always forget. Yeah. The reason why Putin was able to sell this to begin with is what's happened in Donbass, and I'm not taking a position on that because, quite frankly, I'd have to read a bunch of books to even get there. But I think it's important when Americans sit here and say, you know what, it was real easy for Charlie Wilson's war. That didn't really bother us until we're in a war for 20 years.
Right.
Like, I get really aggravated that I've sat in front of a television camera now for almost 10 years since losing my leg saying, Americans, please ask questions before we get into another war. Please ask for accountability. And if you do that now, I mean, you're in Putin's pocket, right?
Exactly.
I mean, come on. There has to be an opportunity for Americans to understand what we're getting into, and at any point, no matter how righteous the cause.
Jessica, and the whole idea now, if we're fighting to this point where we're at a stalemate, it's all about diplomacy, isn't it?
A lot of it is at this point, and I thought it was really important that John Kirby in his briefing this afternoon basically said, we're doing things that we're not telling you about, which is kind of what everyone's been asking for. And you expect that your government, and the most powerful government in the world with the most weapons and all that, is doing more than they're publicly coming out and telling us about. And that is a game changer, because one consistent thing that I've noticed from everyone I've talked about this with, and everyone is on the same side here, whether you're Republican and Democrat, is we want to know, what are you doing for them? These people are making such personal appeals. Zelensky has just the videos he's putting out, theatrical, emotional. He's taking us on a tour of Ukraine that makes it palpable for the average person sitting in their home in Kentucky. And what are we doing? And John Kirby, he told us, we're doing things. Those missile systems that are in there, we're not saying we gave it to them. We're not going to tell you what's on the ground there, but I'm telling you that we're doing more than you think that we're doing.
Could I add one thing, Judge, just before we go, in terms of that creative thinking? It's something that doesn't have to do with weapons, but it could be something that really could help the actual Russian people and not help Putin. So could you figure out a way to have a creative banking system that allows the people who are in Russia to actually that either can't leave Russia, or the ones who have left Russia already, like that set up shop in Kyrgyzstan as a tech company? Can you find a way for them to be able to be a part of the international banking system or our banking system, but separate out the leaders like Putin and the oligarchs and the military, so that you create some sort of a fissure that way, which is a creative way to do it without weapons?
Dana, that is too smart. That's never going to happen. It's too intelligent.
Yeah, but not only that, I mean, you draw a distinction, and that is between Putin and the Russian people. And we've got to recognize that the Russian people, a lot of them are being oppressed by him as well.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.